Okay, next we're going to look at the topic of emotional congruence with children. Just to very quickly define what we mean by this, when we're talking about emotional congruence, we're talking about a perceived or an actual emotional bond with children that maybe isn't there with adults. So it may be referred to as an over-identification with children, for example. So do you identify more with children than adults? This doesn't necessarily mean that an individual will identify as a child, but on an emotional level they may connect in a slightly better way with children than they do with adults. Now we know that this is a significant risk factor for sexual reoffending among people who have been convicted of child sexual offences when they're released back in the community. And this may be because they're seeking out emotional closeness maybe with children rather than with adults, and we know that that level of social support is really important when it comes to desistance from crime. It may be that they don't have the requisite skills to obtain that from adults, so they seek that out in children instead, which then leads them into this trajectory back into sexual reoffending. And we know that this is more prevalent as an issue among extrafamilial perpetrators of child sexual abuse than it is for intrafamilial perpetrators. Now what we mean by that is that, so for example, an extrafamilial perpetrator of child sexual abuse will abuse children who are outside of their home. An intrafamilial perpetrator will offend within the home or against children that they know. Now this may be explained by thinking about the existing relationships that people have with children. So for example, if somebody is very emotionally congruent with children, then it makes sense that they would seek out lots of different interactions with lots of different children. If someone is low on emotional congruence with children, well, they may just have that natural bond that they have, whether that's a paternal or another family kind of relationship with people who are within, or with children who are within their own family. But because of that low level of kind of trait emotional congruence with children, they don't seek out other children to have emotional kind of relationships with. According to Ian McPhail and colleagues, there are three models of emotional congruence. The first one is related to the blockage model. This essentially suggests that problems with adult relationships lead to kind of distorted expressions of emotion and intimacy. And what that means is that instead of seeking out emotional bonds with adults, because people don't have that maybe required level of social skill, they will seek it out with children instead. The second model is referred to as the Sexualdeviance model. This is a fairly straightforward model to understand, in that the targets of someone's sexual arousal pattern will also become the targets of their emotional or romantic attractions as well. So what these individuals might be doing, if this model is correct, is that it will be projecting positive personality traits like caringness, tenderness, being able to have a conversation, have that emotional bond with people who they are sexually aroused by. The third model is referred to as the psychological immaturity model. This essentially assumes that people will have low levels of just general psychological traits. So they'll be psychologically immature, they'll be very impulsive, have a lack of problem-solving abilities, they'll have very poor interpersonal skills, lack of insight, lack of planning, these kind of very kind of low-level cognitive kind of difficulties. Now, in probably the most wide-ranging study that's looked at the topic of emotional congruence in children, or with children, Ian McPhail and colleagues have found that there is quite strong support for the Sexualdeviance model. So this idea of people who are high on emotional congruence will also see kind of will also have high levels of sexual preoccupation around children, and they will be physiologically aroused when they are shown images of children, or they'll hear stories that involve children. This is support for the idea that people are projecting emotional congruence or emotional traits onto the target of their sexual arousal patterns. There's moderately consistent evidence for the blockage model, and what this means is that people who are high on emotional congruence with children will have issues with social rejection and loneliness. So they might not have these kind of high quality relationships with age appropriate individuals, and instead they'll seek those out with children. Now, we do need to have a little bit of caution here in that the sample used in this study were people who were convicted of child sexual offences. So there may be a skew in the social rejection and social isolation data here, in that we know that people who commit these kinds of offences are socially rejected and socially isolated. However, there was no evidence whatsoever for a psychological immaturity model, and what we mean by this is that individuals with high levels of emotional congruence didn't show any issues with cognitive problem-solving ability or understanding what an intimate relationship might look like. They weren't any more impulsive, they weren't any younger than those who were low in emotional congruence with children. So what we see here is high support for a sexual deviance model of emotional congruence, which is consistent with the third of Cito's criteria for sexual orientation, in that there's a congruence between romantic or emotional and sexual attractions. Now, that link becomes even clearer when we consider emerging evidence about falling in love with children. I kind of alluded to this in the previous video. So this is a study that's just been published in the last few months by Frederica Martin and colleagues. And what they suggest is that the exclusivity of paedophilic sexual interest predicts higher rates of falling in love with children and lower rates of falling in love with adults. Now, what this means is that the more exclusive somebody's sexual interests in children are, so the less interested they are in adults, the more likely they are to report falling in love with children as opposed to adults. If you flip that and you think about non-exclusivity, then those people who were sexually aroused by children who are not exclusively paedophilic report equally high rates of falling in love with adults and children. So you see this difference in self-reported, the self-reported prevalence of falling in love, this kind of romantic feelings towards children, that is consistent with the level of sexual arousal or the exclusivity of the sexual arousal. This was a study that was run through VERPED, the Virtuous Paedophiles Forum. So this is perhaps more representative than some of the other studies that maybe use more offending populations to study emotional congruence. So that is emotional congruence, thinking about kind of the emotional and the romantic links between adults and children. Those who are high on emotional congruence typically will have greater levels of sexual arousal towards children, and they are potentially more likely to commit acts of sexual reoffending after they've been convicted for a first offence.